Good morning. We have no introduction this morning. That's okay. Good morning. What if how would your life be different if you had a foolproof method to let you know the truth about anything with confidence and definity? So yesterday we talked about a system just such as this, right? We talked about Dr. David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. And it's a book about how Dr. David Hawkins and his work with kinesiology, which is basically muscles and their muscle reaction, and how our minds are connected to the collective consciousness that knows everything. All right. So that not only are our minds connected to the universal consciousness, collective consciousness, divine consciousness, you can call it the matrix, you can call it what you want. But since we are physical, mental, and spiritual beings, that this connection is bigger than just our mind or our spirit, that it includes our bodies. And that means that our bodies, our muscles, the intelligence. Okay, let's back up. Collective intelligence, the universal intelligence, the divine intelligence knows everything about everyone, right? Every little tiny bit of information that's ever happened, anything that ever will, all collected in the collective consciousness, right? And that we have access to that through our minds. And Dr. David and I, of course, I'm not the first person to suggest this, right? That we have the power to connect to that through meditation, through prayer, through letting go of our ego. That's not a new idea, right? But the new idea here is that that connection is so strong that our bodies feel it too, and that our muscles actually react in ways that give us the answer to the question yes and no, right? That our muscles have strength, show strength when tested against a positive or a true statement, and then show a weakness when tested against a negative or a false statement. And we talked about this testing could be done several ways. You can do it with a partner. You would just hold out your arm. This is not new. The kinesiology has been pioneered since the 70s, and it was originally discovered when Dr. George Goodhart, that's his name, found that our bodies had stimulus, had a weak and strong response to benign stimulus. Things like, it started off with food, with nutritional supplements. When you put a nutritional supplement that was good for your body next to you, your body responded with strength. When you put artificial sweetener or a chemical that was not good for you next to your body, it responded with weakness. And again, the testing is you hold your arm out, you say a statement. If it's true when they push down, there's strength. If it's not true, let's see if I get this in the picture. When they push down here, your arm just automatically is weaker. You can do it by yourself if you don't have a partner. You can do it with 2 fingers. And I'll use my name as an example. If I put my other hand here and I say, my name is Tina Ann, can't get it through. If I say, my name is Mary Ann, pulls right through. I didn't use any different power on this hand, right? The test is the muscles. I am Tina Ann. I am Mary Ann. It's an amazing thing that this truth is available to you, and you can test it yourself by saying things to yourself that are known falsehoods or known truths. The truth is, when they were doing this testing, when they were discovering this, they just discovered that this held true when we were doing the 2-person testing, when the helper who was doing the pushing held a thought in their mind and didn't even tell the person whose arm they were pushing what they were thinking, they still responded appropriately. When they did this test with words written down in sealed envelopes where they didn't even know what they were testing, they were just, what is in this envelope true? It still held true, because this is bigger than your conscious thought, right? So this test is so simple that it is available to you at any time to test now, can't predict the future, like a couple of caveats, right? Can't predict the future with this. And well, there's a few more things, and I'm going to suggest you check out yesterday's show for all the details about the testing and calibrations. But In the book, Power versus Force, they use this testing to what they call calibrate or assign a range of positivity, a range of impact that goes from 0 to 1,000, right? And in this impact, we find out that this is kind of describing our vibration level, or where are we, at what level of these are levels of consciousness is basically what this is, a calibration of levels of consciousness. And they're stratified into by numbers 0 to 1,000, with the understanding that you got to hit 200 before you're having any kind of growth, right? Anything below 200, you're in a self-destructive pattern. Get to the point about 200, you start to growth. 250, you start getting some awareness. Spiritual masters operating at 500, 600. Human form operates to about 600. 600 to 1,000 is big stuff. Okay, what a simple explanation, right? But today, I want you to check out yesterday's show because those are the details. But today, I just wanted to talk about the implications of this. Good morning. I'm Tina Ann, Queen of Happiness, and this is what we're going to follow up on today. The idea of truth, of calibration, of vibration, the meanings of these. And if you are stopping by on the replay, wonderful. Leave me a note. Love to hear from you. Give me a hi or a high five or an emoji or a heart or something to let me know that you're here. Love to know what you think. So basically, the world that you see, just like anything we know, is a fraction of what's going on, right? We are only seeing the very tip of the iceberg. We see what happens in the world. So this is what's going on in the world. There's so much going on. There's so many influences coming at us from so many different ways. It looks like chaos. It looks like just random things are happening, right? The news, the politics, your family, your job, everything in the world, the music that you listen to, the people that you hang out with, everything in the world is influencing you, right? You think you're making decisions we are making decisions as all these things are impacting us, right? And we think that we are then somehow formulating our conscious decisions of moving forward. But okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm ahead of myself. So what we see, the reactions, the behavior, is the result, the tip of the iceberg, the visible results of all the unseen things that are going on around us, right? We see reactions, not the entire thing. The world assumes a linear progression of causality, right? We back in the day, we had this kind of A, then B, then C kind of an idea. A happens, and then B happens, and then C happens. Think of it in terms of maybe a pool ball. I shoot the white ball, it hits the 6 ball, and that hits the 8 ball, right? A, B, C. But this is called the Newtonian concept of causality. It started with Isaac Newton way back when. But science has made breakthroughs since then, right? Between Einstein, Heisenberg, Bell, and Bohr. Sciences. Our ideas of the universe have expanded greatly. And now we see there are theories now that it is bigger than that. Think of it like a clock that has all these impacts that are happening, right? It's like a clock with moving gears. Now in a clock, some gears, giant gears, when they move, and they move real slowly, and a little adjustment of that, barely notice it on the big scale, right? Maybe over time you'd see a tiny adjustment you'd lose seconds, but not quickly. Then you have the little tiny gears that are so tight that one tiny adjustment throws the whole thing off. Now, the point where very little change causes big changes, right? This is called, these are identified as critical points, where the least amount of force exerts the greatest effort. And the result of this, okay, I'm trying to explain something that's really complex, and I barely understand it myself. So I'm just going to try a little. This is a simplification of something pretty complex. But chaos theory and a lot of other theories say that even though there are all these random patterns going on around us, chaos, that within that chaos, there are observable patterns in what may seem like random data. Now, this was discovered by Edward Lorenz studying weather patterns, right? Looking at just random weather patterns, and he finds out this pattern that is waves that look like this. And they call it Lorenz's butterfly because the end thing kind of looks like a butterfly. These two giant circles. What are these two giant circles? Positive and negative. Truth and falsehood, right? But they create what they call attractor patterns. Attractor patterns are giant, seemingly random influences that impact us, that are putting thoughts and ideas into the collective consciousness that is coming down and impacting you. I might be explaining this badly. So the patterns are called attractor fields, and there's this discovery of these attractor fields. Some are positive, some are negative, some are strong, some are weak, and there is this critical point, right, where very little movement makes a lot of stuff that separates them, the positive from the negative. Now, this correlates really highly with high and low energy bonds in the mathematics of chemistry. So this isn't something new. These are just patterns that we see, that things are repeated everywhere in science. And this is one more saying, hey, what we consider random thought patterns, we're all out here just thinking our own thoughts. Stuff is happening. Music's being created. History's being created. News is being created. We're taking it all in. We think it's all a bunch of randomness, when in fact, it is a series of patterns that attract us to the positive and to the negative. Okay, simplification, that's what I call this, right? And then Dr. Hawkins says, we can intuit. We have intuition, an infinite domain of potential consciousness itself. We are connected to everything that's known, that's ever has been known, that ever will be known, within which there is an enormous, powerful attractor field organizing all human behavior into what is our innate humanness. Okay, so what seems like randomness in the course of civilization and history is really patterns of energy, that are impacting us, and we think we are having independent, our little ego-based selves think we're having this little independent thoughts, when it's really just our little section of the world, and we are just reacting to all these influence patterns happening all around us. So within this giant attractor field are lesser fields of progressively less energy and less power, again, influencing human favor. And so these patterns are what has made up the history of civilization and mankind. And advanced theoretical physics demonstrates that everything in the universe is subtly dependent upon and interactive with everything else. Okay, again, big ideas. The map of consciousness. Now, yesterday we talked about, again, this is a two-part show, so I'm going to keep referring back to yesterday's show, which was set down the basics, right? Let's see if I can find it here. Oh my, hold on one second while I find something I should have marked. Here it is. So in the map of consciousness, I said we stratified into a calibration of 1 to 1,000, a metric for a metric of consciousness, a metric for enlightenment, a metric to say at what level of consciousness you are operating on right now, or any idea is operating on, any music is operating on, any political activity is operating on, any common beliefs held by a majority of people is operating on. There's no telling what is manufactured, or what is described in this map of consciousness, which takes you from a very low, I'm going to read it to you, but I just want to show you how it kind of lays out. So it starts off with a conscious level of, we'll start at the bottom, not the top, right? Of despising. God view is despising. Life view, miserable. Level shame. And you're operating at a number of 20, right? Humiliation, elimination. And then it goes all the way up to the very top, where your God view is yourself, right? You're seeing yourself as totally connected to God. and we're going to talk about Dr. Hawkins' view of this in a minute. Your life view, it just is, right? You just accept everything. It is. Your level is enlightenment. You are calibrating at 700 to 1000, ineffable, pure consciousness. You cannot be shaken. Everything is great. And then there's a whole bunch of levels and stratifications in between. We're going to talk about those in just a second. All right, how are we doing on time? There might be a part 3 for this. It's getting so long. Okay. So this map of consciousness kind of highlights the progression of history or of events. And I'm going to use an example here to help understand. One of the most important distinctions from this study is power versus force. Again, we're going to use the 200 line as the calibration. Above that, you are operating from a place of power, of confidence, of a positive force moving forward. But anything below 200 and below, you are operating using force. You can't get your way. There is no power. It is self-collapsing, lack of confidence, lack of trust, lack of faith, lack of connection. And that requires force to make things happen. So we'll use the colonization of India as an example. So at the end of the struggle, where the Brits, at the end of the British rule was one of, self-interest, right? Exploitation. They just wanted India because of its wealth for themselves and not as concerned about the Indian people, right? That calibrated well below 200, self-interest. Then you had the motivation of Mahatma Gandhi leading the Indian movement, who really just wanted what was best for the people. And he's calibrating at 760, the top of the range of human consciousness, right? Now, Gandhi had a position of power, one of righteous, one of the right? The right thing to do, one of power, where the English represented force. We want what's best for us, not for you, and we're going to take it by force. This is the existential struggle of life, right? Through history, the microcosm for each of us in our daily lives, in our relationships, and even farther down in our discussions with ourselves, right? Power versus force. Whenever force meets power, force is eventually defeated. And so, although we ascribe our actions to reason, right? We think we're thinking beings, we're operating into reason. In fact, operates primarily out of a pattern of recognition, right? The logical arrangement of data serves mainly to the logical arrangement of data is just a pattern recognition system, right? Our little monkey brains are constantly taking what we know, what we've seen, what we've heard, what we believe, and predicting the outcome and making our decisions based on what we think is going to happen. And that's just the way we operate, right? But the logical arrangement of data serves mainly to enhance a pattern that we want to we call our truth, right? Consciousness automatically chooses what it deems best from instant to instant, because it only has one function, really, right? It only has one function which is capable. Power is effortless. It goes unseen. It just is. It's unsuspected. Force is experienced through senses, right? Force is gun at your head. Power is recognized through inner awareness. Okay. Now, I'm going to spend a few minutes going through the levels of consciousness, but before I do, I want to tell a quick story. At the end of the book, Dr. David Hawkins talks about his own experiences, although I honestly noticed that he never uses the word I or me, because he has passed now on to his next adventure, but he became so enlightened, so aware, so connected that he lost, or he did not leave, he relinquished any ties to himself, to his ego, and stopped referring to himself as I, but as part of the collective. Now, as I read through his personal experiences, which included some connections, some near-death experience type connections with the divine that convinced him of his, or I guess brought him to his perceptions. And then he started doing all this work, all this testing. He talked about he had to kind of leave his spiritual self behind so he could actually function in this role, because he was so ascended. He was beyond everything going on Earth. Okay, maybe too much detail. But the ultimate thing that I took from his story of himself and his journey and his experiences that took him from one calibrated level to the next, I'm pretty sure he was up in the 700s by the time he had passed, was the takeaway for me was connection, was that we are all connected, that we're all operating with the same mind, even though we've because this is what we're trained to do here on Earth. We've claimed a tiny portion of it as mine. We love me, mine. I own it. I am me, right? And we fail to see that we are simply reacting to everything that happens to everyone in every minute, and that we are connected and responsible and part of all of that. So I want to tell you a little bit about my experience at the beach yesterday, and then going through this. I might go through the stratifications of the levels tomorrow, because you could read about that in this book. And while it's really important to understand where you are and what the growth path is, it's so thick, and it's like an entire show all by itself, I will say. Just going through in fact, that's what we'll do tomorrow. We'll go through the levels, since I'm in charge. I get to do what I want. But I wanted to tell you about my story from yesterday, or 2 days ago, I'm sorry. Went to the beach. We had grandkids coming over for a week because of vacation of my daughter. And, it's just going to be a busy week. We love having them here, but it's a different life than we're used to. So we said, hey, let's go to the beach and have a couple hours before the kids get here. Went to the beach. The man fished. I played in the sand. And in fact, made notes from this book for the next day's show, which I knew I was going to be reviewing the book. And so I was on the beach, actually with my book in my hand, making notes, highlighting, putting little stickies in to bring out the points I wanted. And it was time we were going to change spots. He wanted to fish someplace else. So we went to the car, and I realized I had locked my keys in the trunk. So to make matters worse, it was a long story. We locked the keys in the trunk. Luckily, my phone was not in the trunk. Called AAA. They came out. They opened the doors of the car, but sadly, something was going on. Some button had been hit. Some electrical system triggered. But when you hit the button inside the car door, the trunk did not open. Inside the trunk are the keys to my other car, my wallet, every credit card I own, my identification, all required for AAA service. Anyway. It was an entire day. We called. I was on the phone with the dealership. I was on the phone with AAA. No, this particular car, there's nothing you can do but order a new key. We don't have a spare key. You're going to have to order a spare key, and it takes 3 business days and $250. And by the way, you have to come here in person with your ID and registration. The ID's in the car. So you can imagine it was a whole day of frustration. We called out. And the car is a sports car. It's a roadster. So it can't be a normal tow. It's just too low to the ground. It has to be towed on a flatbed. So, and the kids were coming. So had to call and make arrangements for the kids to stay at a sister's house, another daughter's house, while we were stuck at the beach. On the phone with, we hit AAA on the phone 3 times. We were at the beach. They couldn't find us because there's no address at the beach. After a whole day of this, finally the guy came out. He says, I got a friend who's a locksmith. I think he can fix this. He called the friend with the locksmith. The locksmith came out, picked the lock, made us a key that just works for the door in the car. All's well that ends well. But this was 6.5 hours later. We got to the beach at 11:30. We got home at 6:30. Just say, the man and I are at each other, because it's very frustrating, and everybody's unhappy, and we're seeing the worst, right? And we're not operating at our best. And I was happy the entire day. I lived through the entire horrible, frustrating day with a smile on my face because I just kept thinking about Dr. Hawkins. Every time the man would be mean or rude to me because he was so frustrated, not mean or rude, but just a little harsh because he was so frustrated. I just think that's me being that. We're all connected. That's me acting like that. Stop that. I don't like it. It's okay. We all get unhappy. When we all get a little unpleasant, when we get a little unhappy, that's just, that's just life. And I just accepted it. And I played in the sand and I read my book and took care of my phone calls. And I don't know. I feel like Dr. Hawkins said I could get, he says okay, a couple of facts because I'm just babbling at this point, which is okay. I got no watchers. If you're here on the replay, you'll babble with me. 85% of the world, 200 is the breaking point. 200 is the point at which we start to have the wherewithal to not be so concerned with ourselves, right? To start having a way to deal with and counteract the negative or destructive attractor patterns that are all around us, right? If you're below 200, you're kind of succumbing to them and you have to work really hard, and it's hard, but to get to 200. Now, he says 85% of the world is operating at less than 200. He says that the collective, in the 1970s, the collective consciousness of the world was at about 194, but today it's at 204. So we're seeing positive moves as more folks are joining that above 200 crowd. We are seeing a shift in the collective. He says one person calibrating at 500 can counteract thousands, tens of thousands of people reacting at the 150 mark, right? At the below 200 mark. He says that, Dr. Hawkins says that each of us in our lifetimes averagely advance about 5 points on the scale without some kind of life-changing experience or real inner work, or without the willingness to open up to the possibility that there is more, is that we all move about 5 points in our lives. But he says, by just reading this book, by just understanding the tenets, by just opening up your mind to the possibilities of what is at play here, you can increase where you operate from by at least 35 points. Now, this is exciting stuff because, again, we're talking about a metric, a measurable, observable, relatable number that we can understand. When you just talk about things in abstract, it's better, I'm worse, I'm more enlightened, I'm less, this was more negative, more positive, right? Then it's all relatively. Now, through the effort of testing, does this calibrating at 200? Yes or no? Is this calibrating? Right? Then, and when we can start, let's see, I lost my train of thought. 35 points. Felt happy all day. Felt connected. Have had several things happen that since then I feel like I'm operating from a new level of consciousness, that I have walked through a wall of fire, stepped into the next plane. Now looking forward to the next challenges that come on this level as I try to gain understanding and lose that I and become a part of the collective. Very difficult. I'm quite attached to my ego, as we all are, right? Letting go of it is going to be the journey moving forward. So this is the story. This is the power versus force. And maybe, I guess my hope here is that you're going to start to a little bit be aware. Power versus force. Positive versus negative. Dr. Hawkins says, extreme joy, extreme connection. He said he lost all connection to the I, traded individualness for the joining of the joy of the collective. Where did I put that? Oh, he's in brave. Okay. And then I also, let's see. All right, here we go. I'm just going to read a little bit. The key to joy is unconditional kindness in all of life, including one's own self, which we refer to as compassion. Without compassion, little of any significance is ever accomplished in human endeavor. We may generalize it to the greater social context from individual therapies wherein patients cannot be fully cured or fundamentally healed until they invoke the power of compassion, both for themselves and others. At that point, the healed may become a healer. This is the critical change, right? To go from concern to compassion, to inward, from outward to inward. Levels below 200 are destructive of life in both the individual and society at large. In contrast, all levels above 200 are constructive expressions of power. The decisive level of 200 is the fulcrum that divides the general areas of force, falsehood, from power, truth. Okay, and I'm reading here from, I want to a shout out to Matt Tillotson and some his book notes from reading what other people thought of. I did a little research on what other people had recorded or thought of as the takeaways from his book, and I got a lot from Matt's interpretations. But he says, in describing the emotional correlates of the energy fields of consciousness, it's well to remember that they are rarely manifested as pure states in an individual. A person may operate on one level in a given area of life and on quite a different level in another. So whatever you're changing. Your vibration, this is averages. Your vibration is changing from moment to moment. Guilt provokes rage. Killing frequently is its expression. Our unforgiving American society pillories its victims in the press. Oh, this is getting a little out there, isn't it? Fear limits growth of the personality and leads to inhibition. And this is where actually Matt starts taking us through. I'm going to include this link in the show notes here, because instead of doing the show tomorrow on this, I'm going to include this link where Matt takes you through the levels of consciousness on Dr. Hawkins' calibrated scale. And instead of having to read the entire book, you get a little understanding of the map of consciousness from his notes. Anyway, that's our show today. Thanks for staying with us. It's a thick subject, a lot of big ideas. I'm not sure I'm explaining them especially well, but I know that how impactful they've been to me. I know how the changes I've seen in my own life in the short time since I've read this book. And my intention is to go back and read it again very soon. In fact, probably starting again right away. I've been using the Kurt Vonnegut Slaughterhouse 5 method this morning, or the last couple of days, just kind of flipping back and forth through it without much. But I'm going to go back and read it from beginning to end. It was that impactful. It was that important. Anyway, that's our show for today. Until tomorrow, make it a happy day.